Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Dave Ramsey, but if you're not, Dave has been on the radio and the internet for over 3 decades as the OG personal finance content creator, giving advice on how to get out of debt and really just how to take care of your finances. Now, Dave is popular because he's very passionate about what he believes and he's not afraid to say exactly what's on his mind, which is why a lot of people love him, but it also rubs some people the wrong way. But overall, I think his advice works for the vast majority of people. I think he's helped a lot of people straighten out their finances, get out of debt, and really maximize their life from a financial perspective. But like I said, the public likes to flock to TikTok and other outlets to criticize his advice and point out the issues they have with it. So for this video, I thought I'd go into Dave Ramsey's most controversial advice and give my reaction on what I think about it. So make sure you stay tuned because this is going to be a good one. And if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you like these types of videos. And if you wouldn't mind, please hit that like button as well. Thanks. Okay, so right off the bat, we're starting with a heavy hitter. And number one is no using credit cards at all. Again, most of you are probably already familiar with this, but Dave hates debt with a passion. And that's because in his younger adult years, he over-leveraged himself by buying a lot of rental properties, and that ultimately led to him filing for bankruptcy. But that would later serve as inspiration for Dave to start his radio show to inspire others to pay off their debt so that they don't find themselves in the same situation he did. Dave even goes as far to quote scripture references that states why debt is bad and why you should avoid it from a spiritual sense. The man is super passionate about this. So naturally, he really hates that the credit card industry likes to prey on lower income families by allowing them to purchase things they can't afford using credit and getting them into very high interest debt that they're stuck with. And don't get me wrong, that's not to shift blame away from the people who are making bad financial decisions, but Dave would love to see the whole credit card industry collapse. So obviously he's against credit card debt, but he's also against using credit cards even if you pay them off in full every month. And that's because he knows that a lot of people go into credit cards with good intentions, but many people get sucked into buying things they can't afford, carrying a balance, and then getting stuck into high interest debt. And he argues that even if you're the minority and you handle these cards perfectly, any benefits you get from doing so are helping prop up a questionable industry. So what do I think about this? Well, I definitely have and use credit cards, but I also totally understand Dave's point. I think the credit card industry is pretty slimy. I think they take advantage of a lot of people. But the value that I do see in credit cards is that they allow people with no credit history to start to establish a credit score, which will be a huge help whenever they go to purchase their first home. I know for myself, when I purchased my home, I would not have had as easy of a time if I didn't have that credit score already built up. That definitely made the process easier, and it also allowed me to lock in a lower interest rate. And the other benefits of using credit cards that I'm sure you're all thinking of is doing credit card hacking to maximize cash back and travel points. And while I definitely use these point systems, I think people worry about them way too much. People will spend hours and hours maximizing their points, but they don't even know what a Roth IRA is. They don't spend any time analyzing investments or building out a retirement plan. And I think people just waste way too much energy trying to get this cash back, trying to get these travel points, when there's a lot more that you should be worried about. So overall, I don't think this is bad advice from Dave. I totally get why he's against them. I get why credit cards are dangerous for a vast majority of people. Although I will stand by the fact that when used properly, it is good to build that credit score up for when you purchase a home. All right, this one isn't quite as hot of a topic, but another point that I see a lot of criticism on is that before you start paying off your debt, you should have an emergency fund built up of $1,000. And the main complaint is that $1,000 isn't nearly enough for an emergency. But to be clear, before we criticize, Dave does recommend having an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses after you've paid off your debt. And Dave's logic here is that your debt is an emergency, and that anything above that $1,000 that you have set aside should be thrown at attacking this debt and getting it paid off. And again, I totally agree with Dave's logic here, but I also agree with a lot of people saying $1,000 isn't enough. Dave has been giving this advice for decades, and $1,000 definitely is not what it used to be. So I would probably recommend having something closer to $2,000 to $3,000 saved up just to give you a little extra cushion for some of these unexpected emergencies. But again, I totally agree with Dave's overall logic here, and I think if you follow his plan and only save up $1,000, you're probably gonna be fine. I just like a little extra cushion. All right, we've got another hot one that I see come up all the time. If you haven't picked up on this by now, Dave definitely doesn't have the nicest of feelings towards debt. And mortgages are no exception. Kind of. Dave acknowledges that 99% of people cannot purchase their home outright with cash. So he does tolerate mortgages on a primary residence a little more than he would any other type of debt. But he still has some very strict guidelines on mortgages. And his first guideline is to get a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. And the reasoning is simple. It's because you pay off the mortgage twice as fast, and 15-year mortgages typically have lower interest rates, which is an added bonus. All right, guideline number 2 is that even beyond that, Dave recommends putting as much as you can towards the principal on your mortgage in excess of your minimum mortgage payment so that you can pay your house off even faster. And he recommends this regardless of interest rate. So even though he tolerates mortgages, he wants you to attack this thing as quickly as possible. And guideline number 3 is don't have a mortgage payment that's more than 25% of your take-home income. And by take-home pay, he just means after tax, so he's not necessarily including things like medical insurance, retirement deductions, etc. And here's the thing, no one is gonna regret paying off their house early, and Dave often mentions this. If you pay your house off early and regret it, you can always refinance it and get yourself back into a mortgage. So it's not bad advice to tell people to pay off their home. At the end of the day, they're gonna have a paid off house, and that's great. But for me personally, I have a 2.8% interest rate on a 30-year mortgage, and I'm totally okay just making the monthly mortgage payment on that and then putting anything in excess towards other investments. Because my interest rate's so low, I'm totally fine with the risk that's involved, and I definitely like to maximize those investments. Now, if I had an interest rate like the ones being issued today, then I would be getting this thing paid off a lot quicker. But again, to summarize, I think Dave is offering good advice to the general public. Most people who decide not to pay off their mortgage early probably are not maximizing their finances and investments. They're probably using that extra money just to buy stupid crap they don't need. So for them, their money would definitely be better off being put towards their house. And having a paid off house is also a huge source of stability and will offer a lot of people financial peace, which is kind of Dave's whole theme. So again, this is good advice. For me personally, I'm not in a huge rush to pay off my house early, but for a lot of people, it's probably a good idea. All right, Dave's next piece of controversial advice is never take out a car loan. And I can't really argue with this. Car debt is one of the biggest financial issues that Americans deal with today. According to Bankrate, the average new car payment in America is $729 a month. And most houses nowadays have at least 2 cars. Dave gets callers all the time that are paying more in car payments than they are in rent, which is absolutely absurd. So I tend to also be pretty against car debt, but I'm definitely less extreme. I like the principle taught by the Money Guy Show, which if you haven't already, it's a great channel. Make sure you check it out. And that principle is called the 23-8 rule, which acknowledges that most people are in need of a dependable car every day. And says that if you absolutely need to get a car loan, make sure you follow these guidelines. Which is number 1, make sure you put at least 20% down. Number 2, have a loan length that's no longer than 3 years. And number 3, make sure your monthly payment is less than 8% of your monthly income. Keep in mind that does not apply to luxury cars like Teslas. So if you're planning to buy one of those, make sure you just pay cash for it. If you don't have the cash, you can't afford it. And I wouldn't buy one of those till your net worth is at least $1 million. But in general, just cool it with the cars, come on. All right, the last piece of advice we're gonna talk about is the debt snowball. When paying off debt, Dave recommends the snowball method, which means listing out your debts from smallest balance to largest balance, making payments on all of them, but taking everything you have in excess and attacking the smallest debt. Once you pay that smallest debt off, you move to the next one on the list and attack it. And you keep doing that process until all your debts are paid off. The alternative, which most Dave Ramsey critics would argue is a better alternative, is called the debt avalanche. Now, the avalanche method will also have you list out your debts, but instead of doing it by balance, you would instead list it out from largest interest rate down to smallest interest rate. And again, make minimum payments on everything and stay up to date, but take everything extra and attack that largest interest rate debt. Once that's paid off, you move to the next one until you have all the debts paid off. And the argument behind this method is that when done perfectly, it will result in you paying less money in interest than you would with the snowball method, which is true. However, Dave argues that the snowball provides a psychological advantage because it motivates you by getting a quick win early by paying off those smaller loans, which will then motivate you to keep going and attack those large ones. Plus, once you get those smaller loans paid off, it'll free up even more income to attack the other debts. And Dave's point is also true. The correct solution is it just depends on the person. If you're the kind of person who's financially driven and wants to maximize your savings, then yeah, mathematically, the debt avalanche is going to be the best option for you. However, if you think you might get discouraged or you might lose steam while you're paying off debt, and you think you need that little extra psychological motivation, then the Snowball is definitely the best option. And I think the Snowball works best for most people. After all, the people who are financially savvy enough for the avalanche are probably not the same type of people who are in piles and piles of debt. All right, to close out the video, overall, I think that Dave Ramsey gives pretty solid financial advice for the vast majority of Americans. Sure, his plan is not the flashiest or the quickest way to finding wealth, but it probably is the most guaranteed. And of course, nothing in life is 100% guaranteed, but you'll never regret getting out of debt and staying out of debt. It's a pretty tried and true method. Don't get me wrong, I'm also not defending everything that Dave Ramsey has done and has said either. I just thought it would be a fun video to go over some of his most controversial financial advice and give you my thoughts on them. But I definitely want to know what you think as well. Let me know if you agree with me in the comments down below. What advice do you think Dave gives that's good? What advice do you think he gives that's bad? I want to hear it. And if you like this video and you want to see more videos just like it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that like button as well. I'll see you next time. Thanks everyone.